I feel we have a moment right now to act in order to sort of get on top of it, but hopefully prevent it from even getting worse.
A large contributor of the homelessness crisis, along with that affordability piece, is stock.
The alarming fact for me is that it's only 6% of people that are sleeping on the streets that we see.
There is a silent epidemic sweeping the nation, and it all centres around the home. You know, I'm talking about homelessness, but how can you fix a problem that is mostly invisible? To chat through what's behind the growing issue is Andrew McCann, Group CEO at Jellis Craig, and Emily Wood, Executive General Manager of Development at Frasers Property. Look, Emily and Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show. What I'd love to do is just start with a bit of a reality check about our housing market. Nationally, rents have surged more than 49% in the last 5 years. You've got places like Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth. That has increased by about 80%. And in that time, households on an income of about $116,000 have only been able to afford 36% of rentals advertised in the second half of 2024. In terms of dollar figures, it equates to people in Greater Perth paying around $16,000 more in rent than they were 5 years ago. That's annually. Greater Sydney about $14,000 more per year. Greater Brisbane about $15,000 more. That's massive numbers, right? So, Emily, what goes through your mind when you hear those figures?
I think for me, it's a pretty alarming statistic, and I think what it means is for people, they're having to make really tough decisions then on other things in their life and sacrifices, whether that be education, clothing, medical, like all of these decisions now, it becomes about life choices, which is really, really tough. I think for me, the word that comes to mind is urgency. This is, we have a crisis here and we need to start treating it like a crisis. So I know we talk about a housing crisis a lot, but as we can see, it's becoming a real social crisis if we don't do something about it.
Yep. Andy, what about for you?
Yeah, I think about it the same way. It's not just the rent. I think you got to consider all the other additional costs of living pressures. That's probably the alarming part for me. Going to the supermarket, your energy costs, all of those things are under the spotlight. I think that it's been a bit of a sleeper conversation in relation to what does it actually mean for people who are vulnerable. And it obviously sparks the conversation that we're now starting to lean into with a Home for All.
It really is just one piece of the puzzle, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. But when it comes to homeowners, our data shows that some people's mortgages doubled, if not tripled, off the back of those rate hikes in 2022 and into 23. And that's because their fixed mortgage rates kind of fell off at the same time in which we saw these surges. And it was that, double-edged sword that there was really no way for them to go. And then those prospective home buyers saw their borrowing capacity drop by about 30%, which made affordability even tougher to get into the market. Andy, how did you see that play out in the residential market of Melbourne?
Well, I think where it's played out, there's a big post-COVID shift.
Yep.
There was a massive shift around rents. So there was an affordability piece. A lot of people left the city and have come back. That's in many cases created the sense of cost pressure around rental because the demand for rental properties for a period of a year and a half went through the roof. And that's driven rental prices to a point where they're now starting to really challenge affordability.
Yeah.
And we haven't got planning right and we haven't got all the things that we need from government support to catch up on housing. So there is in part a big part of the problem. And then from a housing market point of view, we've certainly seen, I think homeowners feel under threat that what they've paid for their home isn't what it's worth today.
Yeah.
That adjusts for a whole lot of confidence. And I think that we've been in that period post-COVID where there was this significant boom, but there's just been a real lull in activity. And we've seen that across the board, less property transactions. Obviously, with less borrowing capacity, we see pressure on home ownership because people can't afford to sell some of the assets they want to.
Yeah.
Because they can't deal with the recovery and then they can't deal with paying out their mortgage. So it has been quite a negative cycle, albeit as an estate agent, we're always optimistic and ambitious. It's actually been quite a negative cycle.
What type of impact has that had on the development industry?
It was almost like this perfect storm, particularly with the interest rates. Not only was that impacting home buyers, but it was impacting, supply in terms of new builds being able to come to the market. You had incredible cost pressures off the back of COVID coming into that construction cost, but also labour, which means that supply was really constrained, which only then exacerbates the issue. Because if you don't have enough supply, then, that impacts affordability across the board. So there's a lot to unpack with how we can get that supply chain flowing, which then has, a big flow-on effect for the rest of the industry.
Well, look, one of these flow-on effects is that 1 in 10 Australians are now at risk of homelessness. basically what that means is that one unexpected bill could come in and that's going to affect their ability to either pay their mortgage or pay their rent. And tonight, more than 122,000 people won't have a safe and secure place to call home. But what's getting me about this is that most of them aren't actually on the street. Andy, where are these 122,000 people sleeping? Because that's a hell of a lot of people.
Yeah, I think the number's just far greater than I think any of us first thought. So I'm only new to, I would say, that awareness and education around what the homelessness issue really is around our country. And the alarming fact for me is that it's only 6% of people that are sleeping on the streets that we see.
So it's that 94% is invisible.
94% is invisible, and it's couch surfing, it's people sleeping in cars, it's people in temporary accommodation moving from motel to motel that we just don't know about and don't talk about. And I think that we need to amplify a conversation around that.
If you could challenge the stereotype about what it means to be homeless, what would you say?
I feel the stereotype is that people find themselves homeless because of the choices they've made. Mm-hmm. And what we've learned is that's absolutely not the case. It's almost always circumstances they find themselves in. So they might be fleeing a domestic violence situation. They might have found themselves at the end of a divorce. It might be young people who are trying to struggle to go to uni. All of these factors are circumstances that people find themselves in, not choices that they've made. And I think that's a really important distinction.
Yeah, well, it is a real eye-opener about how close the average Aussie is to falling on those hard knocks. But because of this, a foundation called A Home for All has been launched. Andy, just tell me a bit about what it's about.
Yeah, so Home for All is a new initiative bringing together a number of people from the property industry, for be it development, be it residential. Jellis Craig as a group is involved in not just sales transactions, but property management and rental.
Yep.
To really open up and broaden the conversation around how can we deal with this situation. And I think that it's a great initiative that in getting off the ground today, being launched here at Ready, is a great opportunity for our industry to come together and really shine the spotlight.
I think it's great because, you know, our industry does have the power to do quite a lot. And look, fundamentally, for me, property is a shelter. It is a home first and foremost before it's seen as a wealth commodity, and everybody deserves that shelter. Emily, why did you jump on the opportunity to be on the advisory board?
I think for me, having worked in the property industry now for over 25 years, I've seen the impact that a home in a community can have on people and their whole life. And I think for us, the way we view it is it's far more than a house or a shelter. It's really about a place to belong and connect with that community. Because
yeah, I agree.
I think this issue is far more than just a shelter. It's really about providing that community and that wraparound support services that go with that. So you've got to think about it really holistically. But for me, a chance to sort of use, you know, our sphere of influence and voice, you know, to address this and raise awareness was something that was really aligned to our values, certainly at Frasers, but me personally as well.
And Andy, what initiatives is Jellis Craig doing in this space to assist the efforts of the foundation?
Yeah, so the first part is to try and build some exposure off the basis of our 44 office network across Victoria and our 1,200 people. But Jellis Craig also has its own independent foundation. And the Jellis Craig Foundation's raised almost $4 million over the past 11 years to support key community themes that are important to our cohort.
Yeah.
And homelessness has been one of the initiatives that we have up until today been supporting. So we're really interested to lean in and see how our group can support A Home for All conceptually.
Yeah.
And then to make sure that we're channeling funds and opening a conversation around give back. Because one of the things that I'm most passionate about with our industry is our industry is very fortunate. It has a great position in its community, but it also has a responsibility to nurture its community rather than just take from it. And I think this is a great opportunity for the industry to open its eyes to what it might be able to do a little bit more of.
And what's the development industry doing?
For us personally at Frasers, it's a real commitment, I guess, to deliver, you know, not only build to sell housing, but affordable and social housing, and having that integrated approach with all of our communities and projects. And it's not just delivering the actual housing, but the support network that goes around that housing, so that we're really creating communities where everyone feels safe and feels a part to belong. Mm-hmm. I think our industry's got a great track record of doing a lot in the space, notwithstanding the particularly challenging times in the last 3 years. But I think a lot of advocacy work, particularly in the government space, you know, we need all levels of government here working together in order to get that supply chain activated. But I think the commitment to delivery and partnering with government, you know, the private sector is going to be a big part of this solution as well.
Who are the key players that need to show up? Is it the government? Is it the building industry? Is it private sector or community at large? You know, Andy, what's your opinion here?
Well, I think the real answer is that everyone needs to turn up. I think that it's not a fight that can be had by one sector alone. I think it's very easy to say that the development industry and the building industry need to solve the problem, but in reality, they have their own problems around build costs, land prices, and other things. I think what we need is awareness, and I think all industries need to understand that we've got a social problem that's only getting worse. Big business, small business, and community coming together to actually recognise that the time to solve the problem is now before it gets worse. So I think we've all got that obligation in one, the way I see our responsibilities in the committee for the time being is to change the stigma of what it means to have an issue around homelessness.
Yeah.
And to understand and recognise that there are 94% of people unseen in this social system that is clearly failing and not working. So I think it's a big answer, but the truth is that you can't rely on government alone. They need to play a huge part, but sadly, I'm a bit of a political animal. We can't really rely on them to fix these situations.
Yeah.
And I think as business, we've got an opportunity to make sure that we're contributing and supporting where we can.
Andy, I'd love for you to chat me through what is the stigma around homelessness and why does it exist?
Well, I think the stigma around homelessness is what most people see, which is they see people on the street that often are, sadly, not well mentally, potentially drug affected, and sometimes have a criminal element in relation to the way that they behave. And I think that stigma is where people will turn their mind off to the reality of what homelessness is as a situation. I think the reality is that that's a very, very small percentage of people who are living without shelter and home. And the bigger part of the problem is it could just be anyone's son, daughter or friend who is at a point in their life where they are not financially viable, or they're in a domestic violence situation, or they're not safe in their own home and they don't have anywhere to go and they're surfing on a couch or sleeping in their car. That, in my mind, is the major shift that I've personally experienced and changed through this conversation, and where I think the rest of the public see the stigma of what it means to be homeless.
And Em, do you have anything to build upon that?
I agree. I think it's definitely, there's no silver bullet answer here. It is going to take everyone. And I think for me, what's been really striking in getting, to work with the foundation already, I think that 122,000 stat is at the last census. So that's not incorporating the last couple of years of that cost of living crisis. So when we talk about a housing crisis or a social crisis, we haven't even seen the stats play out recently on that. So I think the time to act is now. I think the fact that 1 in 10 people find themselves on that precipice of homelessness means that it's a pretty urgent crisis and one that everyone needs to act on now.
Yeah, well, I was shocked by that stat. I didn't know that because 1 in 10 people equates to what, 2.5 million or something like that. That blows that 122,000 out of the water. Andy, do you actually think homelessness is a truly solvable issue?
I think unlikely truly solvable.
Just given those big numbers that we've just spoken about.
Yeah. But I think that you have to start with an end in mind. And I think the major part for the end is to improve and rectify the curve here, because I think things aren't getting better in this space.
Yeah.
And until we start to build some practice of educating and creating awareness, changing the stigma of what it means to have a homelessness set of circumstances upon someone that you know or that is near to you, and then providing opportunity to build into better strategy. And I think that's where business, and whether it's the property sector and bigger business, that's where I think we add great value to forcing what the issue really needs to be at government, rather than it becoming just a topical conversation to win votes in an election and a wait and see approach, which is what we've been seeing up until now.
Yeah. So, Em, how do you think then it can be solved?
Oh, look, I wish I had the magic answer, but I think it's about everyone, first of all, raising awareness. And I think that's a lot about what this foundation is about. And I think our job in the short term is to really raise that awareness. And as Andy was saying, reduce that stigma. I think the picture of who you have in your mind of who is homeless is often very different to the reality. And I think if we can start breaking down that barrier, I think that goes a long way to then helping that solution. I think it can seem like an overwhelming problem, and it can seem like it's all too hard and there's nothing we can do. But I think if everyone just starts doing their one little bit, that does build a momentum. And I think for me, if you look at the trajectory, and we were talking about this earlier today, of America and where they're going from a homeless perspective, and Australia's trajectory is right behind that. And I feel we have a moment right now to act in order to sort of, hopefully get on top of it, but hopefully prevent it from even getting worse. Homelessness is not a choice. It's a set of circumstances that have happened to you. So it can happen to anyone. So I think that stigma is something we really need to break down in terms of what's on people's minds when they think about that. I think longer term, this is going to require structural change at all levels of government to make sure that we don't sort of find ourselves in this crisis situation again.
Before we wrap up, I've got one final question for you both. Andy, what is the one thing you want people to understand about homelessness and really take away from, say, this episode that we're doing?
I think the last point that Emily made about the fact that homelessness is a set of circumstances.
Yeah.
It's not often a choice. And I think that getting people mostly clear and aware about the fact that 94% of people are not doing it rough in the streets. There's this hidden set of circumstances socially that is playing out, that is only amplifying. I think that's the big play for me. That was probably the most eye-opening statistic.
For me too, yeah.
For me in learning more. And I think the more that we can talk about that, the easier it will be to start to solve it and to warm the hearts of those that will lean in and help us on the journey.
And Em, what about you? What do you really want the general public to understand?
We need to be listening to the people who are also experiencing homelessness, because the lived experience here is critical for us to understand in order for us then to help drive that solution. Again, it just keeps coming back to that point of the stigma attached to what you might think of when you think of someone experiencing homelessness is very different to what's really happening out there. And it can happen to anyone.
Thanks both so much for joining me today. I really appreciate both your time.
Thank
you. Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for joining me. This has been Real Talk. For your weekly fix, please follow wherever you listen to your podcasts and tune in next time for more real questions, news and insights on the topics that matter most from realestate.com.au, Australia's #1 address in property. All information provided is general advice and opinion based on current market conditions. These opinions should not be treated as investment advice. Always obtain advice based on your individual circumstances.
Real Talk acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, air and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present.